afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. President Trump used the White House as his backdrop during the Republican convention and declares himself the law and order president. The virtual Democratic convention featured the diversity of America and its people during the roll call for the nomination of Joe Biden as the Democratic candidate for president. Mr. Biden promises to reunite the country. Both candidates are now vying for your vote. Analysis of the Democratic and Republican conventions and what we should expect during the upcoming weeks as we decide our country's leader for the next 4 years. Stay tuned. Another View is back right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Before we get started with our topic today, there are two things I want to bring your attention to. I hope that you will think about joining me this evening for the Democracy and the Informed Citizen panel. As 2020 United States presidential election approaches, Slover Library is examining the power of voter accessibility and information during the election season in a two-part series of virtual panels. And I have the honor of being on the panel for tonight. It is called Democracy and the Informed Citizen. It's this evening, Thursday, September 3rd, from 6 until 8 p.m. virtually. Seasoned journalists of Hampton Roads and experts from Old Dominion University will gather virtually with Slover Library to explore the critical role of local journalism in support of an informed citizenry. And we're going to talk about the current state of media, new tactics in an increasingly digital era, and how they shape the election process. In addition to myself, Ryan Murphy, who is a reporter with the Virginian Pilot, Dr. Jesse Richmond, Associate Professor, ODU Department of Political Science and Geography, Peter Adams, author and lecturer, also at ODU's Department of English, and Amy Matsky-Fawcett, Strategic Communication and Outreach Coordinator, ODU College of Arts and Letters, is serving as the moderator. It is free. You simply go to sloverlibrary.com/vote to register and join us tonight from 6 until 8 p.m. And those of you who are out there who are actors and you're looking for an acting opportunity to be done virtually, the Tidewater Community College is staging a revival production of the play Cast in History. Now, this is written by Terrence Affer Anderson, who's a well-known director and producer in this area, and it features a number of historical African-American greats from Hampton Roads, to include Sergeant William H. Carney, of Norfolk, Virginia native, who was the first African-American soldier to be awarded the Medal of Honor for heroic deeds at the Battle of Fort Wagner, South Carolina during the Civil War. And his story is a scene reenacted in the play Glory, if you saw that, featuring Denzel Washington. So they're holding auditions online, and then the final presentation will be filmed at the TCC Roper Performing Arts Center, socially distanced, of course. And then there will be a screening and a talk back. So if you're interested in submitting your audition, go to, or need more information, email roper@tcc.edu. That's roper@tcc.edu, and they will send you all of the information that you need. So if you are a budding actor out there or an experienced actor and you're looking for an opportunity, this is it. The deadline is this coming Sunday, September the 6th. So you need to jump right on that if you are interested. The coronavirus pandemic has affected our lives in every way, including the way Republicans and Democrats formally nominated their candidates for president of the United States. Virtual reality replaced large crowds, campaign buttons, and floating balloons. And now Joe Biden and President Donald J. Trump are working hard to convince you that he is the better person for the job of leading the country. We welcome back to Another View Dr. Eric Claville, Director of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University, for his analysis of the conventions and what we can expect between now and November 3rd, which is Election Day. How are you, Eric?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me again, Barbara.
Thank you so much for being with us. So I know that you probably spent countless hours in front of the TV. So did I. So I want to start by asking you, just in a general sense, in terms of both conventions, do you think their messages got across, even though they were virtual and for the most part and not in person?
Well, thank you very much, Barbara, for that question. It's a very good question. As you mentioned earlier, COVID has changed the way that we operate. I'm pretty sure that a lot of our listeners are zoomed out of meetings, but this is the way that we're operating now, and the conventions were no different. I believe that both conventions wanted to portray a message and an image to the voters that they feel will push their candidates over the edge to receive the number of electoral college votes in order to become the next president of the United States. As we saw with the Democratic convention, I'll start there first. It was the first one. Mm-hmm. It was one where it featured a very diverse group of individual speakers, both in ethnicity, race, gender, but also political affiliation. We see a lot of Republicans that came out to endorse candidate Joe Biden and also Vice President candidate Kamala Harris, U.S. Senator Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we also saw former President Barack Obama and his wife. Now, just as a side note, this is not my analysis. This is a personal side. In listening to President Obama's speech, I had a flashback to when things were normal. In society, how we operated through the normal process of government. And right now, we find we're operating in a process of government that is not as normal, that is a little bit more chaotic, and that pretty much has everyone fact-checking every single word that everyone is saying and every single tweet. One aspect of the Democratic convention that I saw that the Republicans didn't do is that they were also reaching out to independent voters. And one thing that Joe Biden stated, he said that he would be a president for all Americans and for them to trust him to bring things back to normal and to save America's position on the American stage. I don't think there was enough focus given to the base voters of the Democratic Party, most faithful, which are African Americans, and that showed in a lot of responses. I do fear that that the Democratic Party is going back to the playbook of 2016 and may make that same mistake. In contrast,
meaning that they're taking the African American vote for granted.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And also, in contrast with the Republican, the president is going back to his 2016 playlist, and he is doubling down, if not quadrupling down, on fear. Mm. With that being the case, we saw in his convention where he accepted the nomination in an audience type on the South Lawn of the White House and mandated that the fireworks be held at one of the national parks, which is the Washington Monument, which, of course, some Democrats raised as a violation of the Hatch Act. Well, whether they pursue it or not, I'm not sure. But also we saw where the president had a message all throughout the convention from his speakers to him that you will not be safe in a Biden America. And he listed a lot of statistics and things that were happening. One thing I believe that was omitted from that particular convention and those statements is that the things that he mentioned are happening now, and they're happening in a Trump America. And I think that was pointed out, but I think it was lost during the convention.
Well, I want to explore that a little bit because one of the questions I was going to ask you as we follow up, well, let me let you finish your overall analysis first, but I want to come back to that issue of law and order because it really is striking a tone and a disconnect that I would really love to hear your perspective on.
Sure. And just a few more moments with what I think the Republican convention did. It also doubled down, if not triple or quadruple down on his base. Keep in mind, you have Republicans who are traditional conservatives who have endorsed openly Vice President Biden, even more so to this day. Mm-hmm. But Trump went toward his base, and these are the extreme of the Republican Party by polls and as we see by individuals on television, talking heads and the like. We also see where the president actually put a lot of people of color, African Americans more specifically, on the platform, not to so much win the vote, but to shave a few points off of the African American voters or to give doubt. I congratulate to Alice Johnson and the gentleman who both received pardons by the president for their time that was served and the things that they've done since they were incarcerated and was released. That was phenomenal. Also to the citizens who were naturalized on television. Now, keep in mind, those individuals did not know that they were going to be on television, but they knew that they were coming to the White House to be naturalized. So congratulations to them for being U.S. citizens. But at the same time, there was a lot of misleading statements in that particular convention. There was a lot of fear-mongering. And basically, Barbara, it was a copy and paste of the Lee Atwater Southern strategy that was utilized during the times of the 60s, the 50s and 60s. And even more so, we saw it, if we have a clip from it, in 2016. The president utilized in 2016 fear-mongering attacking immigrants, more specifically people from Mexico and MS-13. This year, he's using Black Lives Matter in the old racial tropes of pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, saying that white women would not be safe around black men. Keep in mind, Barbara, that this is the same racist stereotypes and talk that Dylan Roof wrote in his manifesto before he went into a black church, AME church in South Carolina, and killed those individuals. This is the same information that we see on websites of young white men who become radicalized, who are picking up guns and going to rallies for the purpose of intimidation. Now, they may have another purpose in mind, but what it is actually intimidation. So,
are you there?
Yeah,
oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. So, you're talking about, and we have that clip that you mentioned. Let's play that, and let's kind of juxtapose 2020 with 2016.
Our convention occurs at a moment of crisis for our nation. Homicides last year increased by 17%. The number of police officers killed in the line of duty has risen by almost 50%. Nearly 180,000 illegal immigrants with criminal records ordered deported from our country are tonight roaming free to threaten peaceful citizens. Nearly 4 in 10 African American children are living in poverty. 2 million more Latinos are in poverty today than when President Obama took his oath of office less than 8 years ago. Our trade deficit is $800 billion. ISIS has spread across the region and the entire world. The situation is worse than it has ever been before.
So when you listen to that and then you juxtapose Black Lives Matters and protests and the unrest that's going on and so forth, and then he talks about the law and order president. There's such a disconnect there.
It is, but that is the reality of a lot of Americans, and that are in that far right, that white supremacist group. Now, if you listen to that speech from 2016, it doesn't sound any different from what he did in 2020. Yeah. Only thing you have to do is take out immigrants, MS-13, and replace Black Lives Matter and thugs, okay, where MS-13 is mentioned. That's all you have to do. He mentioned law and order again. And again, the president's job in the United States is to, in any leader of a country, is to govern the entire country and do their best in time of crisis of bringing the country together. The only thing that this president has done is divided the country, caused chaos, caused a lot of dysfunction, And we see that by many, many good men and a few women, because this particular administration is heavy white male in leadership positions, heavy white male. Matter of fact, if you look at a lot of the press conferences and where they're sitting around the table, you see any representation of African Americans, Asian Americans, or even women there. But you see a lot of these good individuals who have respect across the line that have left the president's administration, left the office, left their jobs after a few months on the job because of the dysfunction, because of the chaos, because of the lack of working through the political process, which our country thrives on. We may disagree as a nation, but we have mechanisms in place to come together, to talk, to flesh these things out, and come to an agreement where you won't get everything you want. That's not politics. That's not the process of negotiations. But we get to a medium that works best for the country.
But Eric, I mean, is that system working right now? Because we turn to Congress, the Senate and the House, in order to make those compromises. And instead, things just stop, or they don't get passed, or they get squashed because of partisan politics, as opposed to us trying to use the system the way it was designed, which is to come together with compromise.
Right. Barbara, you're exactly right. I think we actually saw this. We saw this phenomenon happen during Occupy Wall Street. And we've talked about this on the show. Mm-hmm. Occupy Wall Street, which the Tea Party was birthed out of, in part, happened because American elites, the wealthy, were getting richer, and the workers were not, their paychecks weren't keeping up, with the cost of living. So when companies like Enron, Lehman, Bears, Stern, and others, they failed, these individuals lost their jobs. Also, the companies attached to them, the services, the law firms, and the like, and the service jobs, their companies failed, and these individuals did not get these corporate jobs with the same income level. So you have workers who are 50 years old that have master's degrees. You have individuals who are 55 that can't find that type of work. So Occupy Wall Street was a backlash against the economic elites. Then you get the racial part and the immigration that goes in there, because you have to blame somebody, right? So the system blames individuals of color and immigrants that are coming into the country, as opposed to going after the real problem. So it's a backlash against the system because the system didn't work. Now we see 8 years later the Black Lives Matter movement, because the change that we really wanted to see during the Obama administration, you really didn't see, because not that he didn't try. I don't think he went far enough, but not that he didn't try. But the Republican Party and others against the president did so much to push back against the policies that the president put in place, whether it be the consent decrees, whether it be the recommendations for Police in America, better community policing. All those were wiped off the books or even ignored when Trump got into office. And they weren't ignored while Obama was actually in office. So now we see a backlash of individuals that said, we thought things were getting better. We see that the other side does not want to work with us. So therefore, protest is the only mechanism that they have. And you throw in the pandemic and the unemployment and the evictions and all of that in there, and you get a toxic mix of what we've talked about on this show since 2016, that right now we were going to see civil unrest. We were going to see what we call the summer of, I think, 68 or 67, hot summer, where we saw about 150 plus documented what they call riots in various cities. We're seeing that again because the temperature and the conditions that existed during that time period exist now. Poverty, over-policing, ignoring the actual people that need help, and the elites that are actually getting more and more. And Barbara, I just want to point this one thing out before we get to the next question, is that remember when in Europe, where the monarchs were pulled out of their castles and they were beheaded, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So last weekend, I saw a news post where a group actually built a guillotine outside of Jeff Bezos' home in D.C. So we see that history is repeating itself again. The same thing that happened to the elite monarchs that ignored the people and enriched themselves to a level that was unsustainable, the people started pushing back against them. And we see the same thing that's happening here in America now.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. What are you concerned about in terms of the 2020 elections? What are you trying to understand in terms of the information you need in order to make an informed decision in terms of president and the down ballot, everyone else who is running for office during that time? 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Eric, what's the end game for the Senate? And this is why I'm asking this question, because when President Obama was in office, Mitch McConnell said very clearly, our goal is to get you out. And they stopped, taking up laws. They blocked everything to a point where he was really forced to use executive actions in many, many cases as opposed to legislation. Right. Now we have President Trump in office. And again, the Senate seems to be the stopping point. Since 2018, we gained majority with Democrats in the House, but the Senate is still majority Republican. What do they want? Because you see the entire country falling apart. What do they want?
Barbara, that's a very good question. We see that government works best when not one party controls everything. As a matter of fact, people may forget, but during President Trump's first 2 years, the Senate, the House, the Senate and the presidency was both controlled, right, by the Republicans. Now, and also we see the Supreme Court shifting, right? So we see that even now, where he has kind of more shifting as far as party and which president appointed to. And we know the Supreme Court is a wild card where they look at things based upon law as opposed to political affiliation. But to answer your question, what does the Senate want? The Senate has an agenda, and the leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, the conservatives, where they want to pack the courts, and they have done that successfully. They've packed the courts, the lower courts, the appellate, the district courts with, I want to say about, 300?
Yeah, 300.
300 Republican justices. Now, think about that. These are individuals who are younger, they're more far right, and they have more allegiance to the Republican Party and the conservative movement. This plays a major role in future challenges to legislation and also the application of the law in future cases. So really the end goal for the Senate are the courts. The other part of it is to be a backstop against anything that the House, which is controlled by the Democrats, put forth. And as long as the interests of the corporate America and those who have influence in Congress are met, then they can utilize political spin to tell us anything, or the general public, individuals outside of public policy that look at these things and know it. And that's unfortunately. That's what's happening. What does it take to change that? It takes men and women of courage to stand up and say, you know what, I'm not going to do this. Agree with his politics or not, John McCain did just that on a few occasions, where he was the vote that could have tore down the health care bill. But he said, no, this is not the right way to do it. And he stood firm on those principles. We saw Elijah Cummings. We saw Johnny Lewis. We saw Conyers. And all these individuals that I'm mentioning have recently passed away. So we're losing these individuals that had the courage to stand up and say, enough is enough. Let's work through the process. Where are those John Lewises now? Where are those Elijah Cummings now? Where are those John McCains? Where are those Barry Goldwaters who went to Nixon and said, Mr. President, you have no support in the Senate. It's time for you to go. Where are they?
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the 2020 presidential election with Dr. Eric Claville, Director of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University. Let's go to our phone lines. Susan joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Susan. You're on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to make a comment. I have an older brother. In fact, he's 82, very healthy, in northeast Pennsylvania and near Scranton. And he went out to there was a Trump rally up there with, my brother said, about 100 folks. And he was on the opposition side with maybe a group of 13. And he said that the racial slurs and the derogatory comments that were vulgar and taking us back to the Civil War era are just horrendous. And I think that our country needs to wake up, and the Republicans need to stand up and denounce this president that is causing a lot of this problem in the country.
Okay. Thank you so much, Susan, for the call. We appreciate that. You know, the rhetoric, and Eric, we get really hung up on the tweets and you know, things that are said and so forth. But what is it that you would tell voters that they really should be paying attention to in terms of becoming truly informed about the leadership, the two options for leadership, and what would make a good president?
I would say listen to your conscience. And what do I mean by that? You know, as human beings, we have the responsibility to be decent. We have the responsibility to live a life of service, not to be self-serving. We have a responsibility to help, not harm. We have a responsibility to show humanity. You may not get everything you want in life. You're not. In politics, you're definitely not going to get everything you want because the pendulum swings with every election, every piece of legislation. But at the same time, there's a process that we can work through. Who will you be better? Which candidate will our country be better in working through the process again? And at the end of the day, do you want to be the human being that votes for someone that divides the country or works to bring the country together, that literally lies? Now, again, this is not a personal opinion or anything. This is fact-based. We currently have a president that literally lies on a constant basis. His own sister even questioned why people are voting for him. You know, nobody knows you better than your family, right? And I found that to be, for me, just a tipping point in asking myself, how are people looking at this America? Unfortunately, there is an ideology that our country, and the major flaw of our country, the founding sin of our country is slavery, was never really dealt with. And because of slavery, we had a lot of misinformation, a lot of laws, a lot of policies, a lot of behaviors, and a lot of beliefs that were created to put one group above all others. And unfortunately, we never dealt with that earnestly. That is coming back up again. Until we earnestly deal with our past, and America says we were wrong, and let's work to make this country where all men are created equal, then we're constantly going to have individuals on the extreme side that says we want to keep it the way that it was. And unfortunately, that's where we are. We had a great opportunity with the 400-year commemoration of the arrival of Africans here in enslavement as a country to really open up and recognize that these issues still exist and for us to earnestly deal with it. But unfortunately, Barbara, I think we missed that opportunity. So I think we're going to have to go down this path of civil war destruction one more time for us to really get it. But the stakes are much higher because the world is more advanced. We have individuals that are at our heels, like China, Russia, and Iran, that are ready to step up and take the leadership in the world. And that's another thing when we look at our position on the international stage. Which president can take us higher, restore us, and ensure to the world that America is that beacon of light. And unfortunately, if we don't make the right decision, or say the best decision, I'll say the best decision at this time, the world is going to start looking at China, because China, even with its problems, has a lot more stability than the United States right now as it relates to its political process. Now, keep in mind, there are communists, but they're opening their markets up. There's advancement that's there, and China now is ready and geared to take the leadership in the world, especially in the Southeast Asian part of the world.
Wow. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Mike joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Mike. You're on the air.
Hey, good afternoon. This is great conversation.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for pointing out the judiciary, and I think a lot of people are forgetting about that. I think that's a great point, very valid. Also, our position in world leadership is an excellent point. I want to talk today about environment and our environmental stance and our environmental place in the world. And why are the Democrats, especially the Democrat side, not putting more emphasis on environmental stability, environmental reliability, and bringing back, the real environmental policy that's going to help with the climate change? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the call, Mike. Eric?
I think that was a great question, caller. Thank you so much for supporting WHR, WHRV, and Another View. He's exactly right. Barbara, I scratched my head in the messaging of the Democratic Party. Now, the Republican Party is just fear-mongering. That's something that's worked for the last, 400 years, so they're just simply going back to that well. And in addition to that, I want to point out this point. The Republican Party started what we're seeing now. Donald Trump is the product of what they started. When they said Mitch McConnell were going to make Obama a one-term president, and the birther movement, which the president took and ran with, they started that. So they're reaping what they sowed as far as that goes. As it relates to the messaging of America in the environmental stage, there are so many more things, so much more effective messaging that we could do as opposed to be on the defense. But unfortunately, I think that the Democratic Party itself as a whole is simply not on an offensive mindset. It's a defensive mindset. As a matter of fact, you see now everything that the candidate Biden says primarily is in defense of what was said by President Trump. So the offensive stage has just not been there. It hasn't been there since Obama left office. And really, it wasn't really there during his entire time in the presidency because there was an agenda that was set and they were going toward that agenda. But I think they've been at a loss of words since Hillary Clinton's defeat. And unfortunately, I think they still just don't have their footing.
Let's go to Maureen in Norfolk. Hi, Maureen. You're on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to let you know that, in my opinion, everybody should pay very close attention to the fact that every vote counts and everyone needs to get out and vote however they do it. And regardless of Donald Trump trying to mess with the post office and everything else, we've got to get out and vote, because I don't want to see him win the Electoral College again and lose the popular vote. That doesn't do us any good, because the Electoral College time has come and gone, and the popular vote is what should count.
Thank you, Maureen, for that call. Eric, I was going to ask you, and she brings up a good point. Can you explain in layman's terms what exactly the Electoral College is and how it works?
Sure, and thank you, Maureen, for the call. That's a very good question. The Electoral College is simply a mechanism that was created by the Founding Fathers in order to elect the President of the United States. It is divided up by the amount of representatives that we have in Congress and also U.S. senators, which every state has 2 U.S. senators, and the amount of representatives in Congress makes up the amount of Electoral College votes that you have. So therefore, if you have, and it's based on population. So a state that has only 2 million residents does not get as many electoral college votes or representatives in Congress as a state that has 8 million people in a state. So therefore, you have several states that have larger populations that we tend to focus on more so, and the population or the popular vote dictates who those electoral votes go to. So that's our system. And the magic number is 270. And I want to make this distinction. The first one to 270 wins.
First one to 270 wins. Now, the people who vote in the Electoral College are supposed to follow what the popular vote is for that state, right?
That is correct.
And when President Trump won the Electoral College, is that what happened?
It was. We did have a few states that now keep in mind, each state can make their own rules as it relates to their representatives that cast their electoral college votes. You have had, I believe, in Colorado and a couple other states in the past, I actually did analysis on this about a year ago, that where individuals actually cast the vote that they wanted to. However, the state does have mechanisms in place to force those individuals to cast a vote for the popular vote. So therefore, every state so far that I've looked at has provided mechanisms in place to protect their electoral college vote allocation, and the Supreme Court has backed that up.
To make sure that it's representative of what the popular vote was.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So I want to ask you this question because this has really it stopped me in my tracks when I saw it. I was watching a news show on a Saturday morning, and there was a young man who was a NFL player. And he was talking about the fact that growing up, his family was concerned about, where their next meal was coming from, did they have enough money for rent and so forth, and that he had never been in a voting booth and that he would not know what to do, what it looks like, how to even vote. Now, you're on a campus, historically Black college and university campus at NSU, and there are a lot of young men in that 20, 25-year-old range. Is this something, do we need to be bringing the voter booth to campus to show people how to vote?
Actually, I think that's a very good question, Barbara. I know here at Norfolk State University, we do have a task force and also student activities, work with the student organizations in order to ensure that they are registered to vote the right way, giving information on how to vote, how to register, where to register, whether it be here or in your home state. And also, there are the ability to reach the polls on election day where buses are run so individuals can get to the polls and come back. As it relates to education of how to vote inside of the voting booth, I think that's a great idea moving forward.
It literally stopped me in my tracks because I was thinking to myself, wow, first of all, that he, was of voting age and had never voted. So, that's a problem to begin with. But then the thought of, I don't even want to go in there because I have no idea what to expect. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I can function in that space.
Yeah. And again, there are a lot of citizens in the United States that have the ability to register to vote, but actually don't vote. Now, as it relates to African Americans of all individuals of color, as the United States aligns them as minorities, votes at the highest level of any of those groups. Period, hands down. And it was only in 2012 or 2008, I believe, where African Americans actually voted higher than white Americans in the election, percentage-wise. So when people say Black people don't vote, that's a fallacy. Again, look at the numbers, look at the statistics. But there are a lot of people that don't think that the system works for them. And if you're not engaged in the political system, you're just not going to participate. And I say this, if you're a fish and you've always been in water, you don't realize that you need the water until you get out of the water. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with voting. If the process has always worked for you and you're just going along, along your day and your way, or you don't rely, quote unquote, you believe on the system, then you're not going to worry about it. But until the system is broken, then that's when the individuals start paying attention.
Yeah. There are tactics out there too. That are being used. I was reading an article in the Washington Post where they were saying that there were robocalls being sent in Pennsylvania that say if you register to vote absentee or vote by mail, that they can track you for child support or for your criminal record or things of that or things of that nature to scare people from registering and from voting.
Yes.
So,
but Barbara, unfortunately, you're right. There are a lot of, that's what you call voter suppression.
mm-hmm.
That is a form of voter suppression. No longer can we have poll taxes. No longer can you have guess how many jelly beans in the jar or literacy tests or grandfather clause, which were old voter suppression laws after the Civil War in order to suppress the vote and the power, political power of African Americans. But now we have other tactics. We have the ID laws. And remember, after the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act was actually struck down, what happened was you saw states, Virginia was one of them, that immediately enacted the old voter suppression laws during that time period. So now it's more savvy, it's more technologically savvy, and it's fear-mongering. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that are out there, Barbara, is that unfortunately there is the belief that there will be ICE agents at voting booths, at voting polls. So therefore, that's to scare away, again, the people that believe that they are here illegally or just don't want to be harassed. So we have to fight against that, but you're exactly right.
Eric, let me ask you a question, because as you look at the unrest that is happening across this nation right now in terms of racial issues, could we be headed for a race war?
Rob, I think we're already there. And when I say we're already there, right now we have all of the materials. Only thing we need now, we have all the rhetoric. We have the two factions and the extremes of the factions, African Americans and white Americans. And I want to point out something. In Portland, where you see a lot of the unrest and the riots that are happening, those are white Americans primarily against white Americans. The two extremes of the left and the right that are going at it. And a lot of these things where we see this coalition of individuals for Black Lives Matter. So you're not really seeing a lot of the sustained unrest in a lot of these cities through Black Lives Matter, but you're seeing, again, what I mentioned earlier, you're seeing individuals that America doesn't work for them, right, where it did at one point. But as long as the president continues to stoke the flames, he's going to do it because chaos works for him. It's a distraction. And it's playing on the mindset of individuals that want an America that existed before. Keep in mind, the sheriff of New Jersey said that Donald Trump is the last hope for America. The pastor of a major church in Texas, 13,000 members, Protestant pastor, Baptist church, said that Donald Trump is the last hope for America. And you have a lot of people that are going to do it vocally, right? But they talk within their groups. They talk on their LinkedIn pages, their Facebook pages, which I don't know why they do that, but they do it anyway. And they list these things saying, I'm a Trump girl 2020, I'm a Trump guy 2020, we're a Trump family 2020 as far as Second Amendment rights. It's to stop the invasion of immigrants. It's the illegal immigrants. It's to stop the thugs of Black Lives Matter and things of this nature. And all of these are stoking the fires of a racial civil unrest and a race war. And I think that's exactly where we're headed.
So do you think that at this election that will there's a possibility that people who say that they're going to vote for Joe Biden will go into the election booth and vote for President Trump as they did when they said they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton?
I think you're seeing a lot of people, Barbara, that are saying that they're undecided right now, or they don't know and they don't want to take the poll, because we're seeing a large section of undecideds. Those are people that I believe that or not so much undecided, right? I mean, because these are the extreme candidates. You want normalcy or you want what we currently have. These are people, I believe, from these polls that are actually going to vote for the president, but they don't want to say it because, in essence, you don't want to be seen as a racist. You don't want to be seen as someone that supports a president, which many believe are based upon his tweets, based upon his actions, based upon his policies, based upon his history is morally bankrupt. A lot of people don't want to be seen to be associated with them openly. But in the voting booth, when it comes to voting for these two candidates and the fear-mongering, all right, what fear does, it blocks critical thinking and rational basis, all right? When someone says, duck, you automatically duck without thinking, let me look around and see what I'm ducking for.
Right.
So you only need that moment, and that's what he's counting on, that moment, along with other voter suppression processes such as the robocall, such as dismantling the post office and the like.
So, Eric, what would you tell particularly African-American voters as they prepare for November? What's your message to them?
It's a theme that I believe is for all Americans, and that is you want to cast your vote for really the future and the soul of America. I mean, this is where we are, hands down. This is where we are, because at this particular point, whoever is our leader moving forward is going to dictate the direction that America goes. We see what the message is of the current president. We see it. We see what we have for 4 years. We see it. I mean, it's there. And we see the track record of the Democratic candidate. We see the track record and also what he proposes. Again, you may not get everything you want, but we're going to have to work with one of these two entities, and the public is going to decide that. So I believe that each person, African American, white Americans, really should sit down and have conversations with their family and their friends and ask yourself, what is the America that we want to leave to our children that I want to be known for voting for? And that's where you're going to have to go. And then understand that whoever's there, we're going to have to work through the process, restoring the process, the democratic process. One of the great things about our country, Barbara, there are many great things, but the right to vote, the democratic process, is the greatest, just about the greatest. The ability to choose our leaders in order to keep our freedoms of speech, freedoms to protest, freedoms to peacefully assemble, and the like. These are all things that we cherish as Americans, that we cherish in this country that many people don't have, but it only works if we have political stability. And that's what we have to do. So when you go into that booth, make sure you take someone with you to also to vote. Make sure you study the issues, but it really boils down to that because we know what the issues are. We see it. We know who the candidates are. They've told us many, many times over who they are, and we see who the alliances are. So you're just going to have to cast your vote, and whoever wins, we're going to have to work with them.
So back in 2015, if I think I got the year right, Eric, you made a prediction that Donald Trump was going to become president of the United States on this show. So I am asking you in 2020, what is your prediction for our next president?
Well, Barbara, in September of 2019, I came on the show and I provided an analysis regarding what I believe would happen in the election for 2020. I believe that the way things were going after the Mueller report, that President Trump would be president because his base was radicalized. His base was basically wanted to vote for him because they saw the future of America that they want to go back to. After impeachment, I came back on the show in October, and I doubled down on that prediction. Barbara, today, not only do I double down, but I triple down on that. I believe that his base is even more radicalized. I believe that there are so many voter suppression tactics, techniques, and processes in place. I believe that it would be insurmountable to overcome at this time period, given the COVID environment. One thing about the Democratic base is that getting the Democratic base out to vote You need to have a focused message, and you really need a physical voter push into the polls. And COVID simply does not provide that. I believe because of unemployment, I believe because of the financial strains on a lot of families, there are a lot of other needs that people are looking at, I believe, with the job loss and the like. However, I believe that the base of the Trump party and the faithfuls of the Republican Party will vote for this candidate, our president. And I believe that you will have some conservatives that will vote for Joe Biden, but I don't believe that it will be enough because of the voter suppression techniques and tactics that are taking place, and really the lack of the Democratic message to its true voter base. Once again, I believe that they are making the same mistakes as they made with Hillary Clinton in 2016. And I believe that we are in for another 4 years of President Trump. And in addition to that, I give you another golden nugget here. I believe that he will appoint another Supreme Court justice, which would take Ginsburg's place.
Which then would move the court to completely conservative. Or 6-3, right.
Solid 6-3. And if they can talk Justice Thomas into retiring to get someone else younger to be confirmed, I think you'll have a even more solid right conservative.
So we need to the Democratic Party, and we got less than a minute or so to do this. Is there anything the Democratic Party should be doing right now that can push your prediction to the other side?
One message. It's got to be a message that's coalescing around how to vote and how to get to the polls. How to vote and how to get to the polls. One message about that. I think that's the big thing. You got to have that one message. You got to be able to locate people. And I just don't think that the mechanisms are really in place right now, given COVID, in order to do that.
Okay. Well, Eric, you have, as always, have given us a lot of food for thought, and we so appreciate your insight, and we will continue to watch, and we'll continue to talk about where we stand. And I guess your overall message is, regardless of who you vote for, get out and vote. Right?
Exactly. Exercise your right. Thank you so much, Barbara.
Absolutely. That's Dr. Eric Claville. He is the director of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University. And we will be right back. I'm sorry. Thank you, Todd. I know I threw you a curveball there because we got out a little bit early. But my team is always on point. I really appreciate that. Just a reminder that if you are interested in becoming an actor and being in the play Cast in History, reach out to Roper at tcc.edu. They are conducting online auditions, and you have until this coming Sunday, September the 6th. So email Roper, ROPER, at tcc.edu. And hopefully you will join us this evening with the Slover Library. Go to sloverlibrary.com/vote. We're talking about media and democracy. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Todd Washburn is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Please wash your hands frequently, stay socially distant, wear a mask, and join us next Thursday at noon for another view.